my goodness. So I absolutely loved our first conversation. And this is the first time you and I've been visual even. We had our first phone call on the go, right? You were on the go in Minnesota and I was on the go in Chicago. And we were just having one of those easy breezy, like get to know you calls, meet and greet exchanges, as I call them. And the conversation just flowed. I felt like you asked really good questions and there was some inspirational kind of takeaways, even from our first 60 minutes of just banter. And I thought, how great is it for two leaders to pause their day, come together, maybe we'll have others join us, who knows, but to just shoot the breeze a little bit and talk about some trending topics that we're passionate about. And next thing you know, maybe you thought of something differently, which is what's so cool. And I'm somebody who likes to talk out loud, obviously, but to have someone like you who does it as well, but from such a deep thinking space, which is your energy, I thought, let's do this. And what happened? I put out the invitation and you said,
here we go. Let's do this.
You said, let's do this. So basically, you know, if you want to go back, just take us back to your experience with our first call and kind of what you were thinking of, the questions that you were driving and why you reached out to me, even maybe some of the things that were on your mind.
Awesome. Great question. So this is something I'll never waver on for the rest of my life. The initial connection with someone has to be value driven. And that's one thing I picked up from you. It had nothing to do with a financial transaction or some type of hidden agenda, blase, blee, blah, blah. It had everything to do with, hey, is my radar up to maybe some values that I connect with you with, and vice versa. That's all I care about. And that's the only reason or the only excuse, I believe, to have long-term relationships with people. And again, it's not easy, but that was a really simple play for me.
I love that. And it really does show, I think, immediately from an interaction with anybody. Sometimes people come all prepared, right? Like, oh, I checked out your website and I looked at your LinkedIn profile. And I honestly don't even do that always. I like to come straight to a meeting not prepared about who that person is so that they can introduce themselves to me. And then I go check it out after the fact. Have you ever approached a meeting that way?
All good. Yep. There's an organicness that's extremely valuable, 100%.
Yeah, because it's all about first impressions and then taking the energy of how that feels. But I wonder how many people really do that now.
Probably the number is extinct with the dinosaurs, probably.
Right? We're all like checking people out online before we even say hello, instead of going about life open and really engaging people authentically to just get to know you, right? I don't know. Well, so I'm dying to know, what were your thoughts, you know, so some of the questions that you drove to me on our first call and where those were coming from?
Oh, really easy answer. So I believe if you have a significant level of awareness in life, you'll notice people's values when they communicate or not communicate, right? Because we all know communication is a big chunk of it's, you know, body language and all that other fun stuff, nonverbal stuff. But I really picked up your conviction inside of your beliefs. And in 2019, again, that might be as rare or as extinct as the dinosaurs. People actually having conviction. Imagine that in the workplace or on a team or company. Conviction, not in a way where it's ego, right? And they smack people in the mouth every day and create this unhealthy culture, but in a way where it's like, hey, thank you so much for believing in what you do and actually demonstrate that in a contagious way. Imagine that, right? Unbelievable. So thank you.
And a lot of people really don't give themselves permission to live that way. It's really interesting. When I wrote The Talent Emergency a few years back, people were like, well, Nicole, you can't do HR the way you're doing it, or you can't go out and leave corporate and all of that. And I thought, well, just wait until more people decide and give themselves permission to live joy and purpose through their work every day, whatever that might be. And now that's when the talent emergency for me is real, because you and I have done it now for a few years, but I talk to people every day who are still kind of thinking about what they're going to do for their joy and purpose, maybe holding on to stability, not realizing they can get stability doing what they love, and maybe get more out of it. And what's interesting is I think millennials, to be quite honest, have really started that shift for all of us. And that's one really positive thing I can say their generation has already done.
Yeah, let's go.
I mean, they really have. A lot of people in my generation and boomers, I don't know if they ever kind of came out and said, let's go to work and have fun.
Nicole, can I share something, please?
Yes.
So you already know generational gap agility is a really big deal in any culture, right? I don't care if you're an MBA team or a Fortune 400 company, it doesn't matter, right? Nobody's safe. But isn't that crazy? So growing up, you know, I feel like I had the best family in the world, but I got to see my dad have 1,900 different jobs and hate every single one of them. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do now. Not because I expect things to be easy and avoid and be allergic to problems and pain points throughout the day. That's not reality. Life will smack you in the mouth, whatever you do, right? It's how we navigate those transitions that matter. And you know that. So again, that pulse that I had growing up in the generation that I was in, watching my dad as a latchkey generation changed my life. And and it's not that they were bad or we're better or whatever. It's just like, hey, let's evolve and keep moving forward.
Yeah. And everybody deserves to have that ability to say, yeah, let's evolve, let's move forward, let's do what we love. But the world is such a smaller place now. Don't you feel, I don't know, growing up, and I grew up in a small town, Scott, I don't know that I ever really realized how small the world was and how you really could do anything to earn money. And now that I live in like an urban place in Chicagoland, I'm like, wow, you meet people every day who are doing things. Even you go on vacation somewhere and somebody's taking you on a tour of somewhere beautiful and they're getting paid to do that. And you're thinking, I never would have dreamed that big. And reading some of the news that's coming out on LinkedIn, even this morning, I sent you that big 2020 report. We got to dive into that. And I just thought, oh my gosh, now my children, for example, they're able to do what you and I are doing, like intuitively. And they're doing it they're playing their games in a three-dimensional world with people from around the world. It's mind-blowing, actually, how small the world has become. And what do you think is good about that? And what do you think are some of the challenges in that from your perspective, dealing with, where you've come from? And also, you have really unique experience, Scott, with teams in team play, like sports, let's say, but applying that into the business concepts and the business structures.
Yeah, 100%. Great question. So again, everybody in the world wants to be connected, but I believe most of the relationships out there are only semi-real, right? Because when was the last time you were able to brag, Nicole, like for real talk? When was the last time you were able to brag about someone in your professional or personal circle you have a real relationship with, supposedly, that you can count on to a level that you're willing to brag about that to other people? Like, oh, wow, I can count on her. She's got my back. He's got my back. I reach out. They don't have to hit me up to say same day communication, but I know they'll hit me back. They're not going to put me on the shelf and say, oh, I'm just too busy. Look at this stupid busy badge around my neck. And like, for real, like you can count on them. And it's actually a real, organic, authentic relationship. And I think that's what we should all strive for. Yeah. But the world's
people need to be really intentional about doing that. I think, especially if they're social individuals and they can have the ability to drive up a lot of, social activity, if you will, or connectivity. But I think having particular relationships and making sure that you take intention around those that you want to see and be with face to face, and making sure that you're reaching out to see what you can do for those individuals.
Yeah, let's go.
Knowing their 411, I think, is really important. And I do a big disclaimer sometimes when I meet people, because some people come out of the gate like just wanting something from you instead of getting to know you. And I'm sort of like, let's get to know each other. And as long as I know what you're about, like, right, Scott, I know what you're about, then it's not about when I can help you and benefit you. It's about me knowing that what you're about and then aligning to that when I see it over here and I know you two are meant to know each other, or I know you're meant to be in this room with me, or really knowing people and what they want and need, and not just assuming that they can get you something.
100%. Yep.
And I think the same thing applies within workplaces with employees. Like, how many people get to know their people that are working with them versus expecting something for them to do something for them. Just taking
100%.
that universal approach to relationships, I think, is groundbreaking, because I don't know that it's done very well in a lot of businesses.
Well, Nicole, great point. Could I share one thing, please?
Of course, please.
Isn't the billion-dollar question maybe that how do you measure intentionality in the workplace? Because Nicole can walk around all day, Scott can walk around all day and say, hey, how are you? How's your family? You doing good? And you already know people's BS radars are absolutely off the charts.
Yeah.
Right? And they can carve you up like a pumpkin on Halloween and let you know, hey, that's fool's gold, that's fake, that's not real, that's quasi-real, whatever. And again, unless you lay that foundation right from the gate and not let fear come in and status and salary and all the other trash that doesn't matter and confuses people, unless you set the gate right from the start that, hey, we believe in real conversations, we share sensitive truths here, and guess what? We actually celebrate that. And like you said, joyful work, imagine that. Enjoy the journey inside of a process that you can actually have real conversations in right away from day one. A significant emotional experience. I really believe in that.
Well, and what's interesting is it's still such an opportunity, I feel. When you say measure intentionality, I think the first thing is to agree to measure it. Agree to actually get a baseline today.
Yes.
I put out culture surveys, and 10% of CEOs take advantage of even the opportunity to ask the voice of their people, for example, and get a baseline about what that could be. And maybe they don't like what it's going to say, but first, how can you say you care if you're not willing to hear that? And then if you get a baseline, then we can measure it. And I've learned already that every business, even if it's recognized as the best place to work, the one thing that they have down is two-way conversations and the ability to actually care and ask for something and then acknowledge I heard that and here's what we're going to do about it before they do the two-way conversation. And a lot of people are just, like you said, just talking and not saying they care about culture, saying they care about their people, maybe saying that they're intentional, but then they don't want to look at the actual measurements, which you and I both know matter. And you can measure intentionality. You can measure how many times does the manager actually talk to a person? And the technology, the AI advancements right now, those things are pretty cool. And some of the software development that's going on in the AI space in my industry, there's actually performance, management kind of platforms out there now starting to actually baseline and track number of interactions between people within organizations or cross globe to see how many touches there are in terms of reciprocity between departments and human beings.
Wow.
And they can trend that data now. And what's interesting is that's a measurement of intentionality or necessity. And it can also map in a picture, is there communication happening at all? And that's unique. When I saw some of the, and you know who I learned that from? I learned that from a guy in Israel who was working in the tech space and organizational, leadership, but with a tech mindset. And to me, that's cool. Because you're evidence then.
Yep. What's the definition of faith, right? Believing in someone that you work with in absence of proof. We took a shift to, okay, here's a proof. We have no excuses whatsoever. Here's what's going down. Imagine this, Nicole. You jump in every CEO's body in every country in the world, in every company in the world right now, and you have them ask two questions, right? Never exit a meeting ever without asking these two questions. Number one, imagine, you talk about multiplying your revenue stream and your engagement and your buy-in from your team on steroids. Here's what you do. These two questions. It changed my life. Yeah. One is, okay, to your team, what am I not paying attention to that I should be? Yeah. You have to ask that question every single day. And even if it's crickets, they don't say anything. You already said earlier, this is non-negotiable. There are no exceptions to the rule whatsoever to offering that question up every day. And never ever close a meeting ever. With a team company, there's no exceptions to the rule without asking this question, please. Thanks for listening. What question haven't I asked that I should have? And if you're a leader in a company or a team, and if you're not asking those questions inside of your dead corpse, no energy, no execution type meetings, respectfully, you have no clue what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're not well-intended. It just means that you should be more well-educated inside of that space. You can be more effective and more fulfilled. 100%.
Well, and it's interesting. Sometimes we can ask people to ask that question too, just as the chief leaders of their organizations. But I think it's also opportunistic to throw it out as a white canvas even to the teams. And, a road to their exchange. So I talk a lot, but at my last team retreat myself, I walked around the room and just shut up. And I observed, and I put down a big facilitation Google sheet, a Google sheet that they could all type in live, right, by their peer groups, and put down all these line items of their visions about, yeah, this is our BHAG goal, but how are we going to get there? And what are your guys' thoughts? And based on them doing peer exchange, there's way more sparks of innovation in that, and conversation, collaboration, shared appreciation, than me just like, what am I missing? No, it's not about me, guys. This is not the Nicole Martin show, right? Like, this is, what are we going to do and how are we going to get there? But then giving them the brush, right, to paint on the canvas, and then give it time to just digest and let everyone think on it, and then come back and talk on it and move it, but make it actionable.
Nicole, isn't it amazing how soft we have to be by hiding behind, whether it's an app, technology, some type of chat platform, because we can't really have real conversations with people anymore like we should. Isn't it unbelievable kind of how we've evolved to that point?
Yeah, it's sad actually. I think there's a lot of layers of, I call it, that's emotional intelligence, right? So emotional intelligence is you and I living in our strengths, but meeting in the middle, but we choose to meet in the middle. And a lot of people don't realize that they might have cognitive abilities where they're much more eye focused. And there are human beings that that actually walk into a room cognitively and see you first. They're
Gotcha.
very compassionate and empathetic, and they're hardwired that way, even as children. And so what happens is you bring all these people who are extremely diverse in how we think and process information into a room. But if you don't have something in common that they can all identify with, whether it's me being a woman or you being a man, or where we grow up or where we come from or our faith or whatever we think, the diverse way we process information, if there's not something on the table that I call like the culture invitation, which is, yeah, I care about that and I know you care about that because we're all here at the same table, whatever that is, if that's not present, people become very eye focused and they're used to their eye language, and we only have the right to our eye language, our eye voice, not the we voice. And so what is the we voice and the common language that we have so that you and I can come to the table, Scott, and have a we conversation?
Love
Because
it.
if that doesn't exist, then you have 10, 15, 20, however many people you're bringing into the room, they're all coming from an I voice. And they will be fighting, defending, protecting their I voice if we haven't established the we foundation.
Heck yeah.
Like how when you're building, you coach, you do a lot with like teams. And I'm fascinated by what you do within the team and sports arena, because some of the foundations of teams is so deep. And you know, you'll meet people who play sports with each other for years, right? And they become like brothers, sisters, right? And it's where there's lots of accountability in those conversations in those high performing teams, right? They have skin in the game, so to speak, no pun intended, but they literally have each other's backs. And the thing is that in corporate environments, we have not done a good job for many years of having each other's backs, right? So you're asking people to say suddenly that they're on the same team, but if they've never seen it demonstrated when they were coming up in corporate, they might believe it too, right, Scott? They might believe it, but
Yep.
they don't know how. People do not know how to do this and bring people together in a meaningful way if it has never been demonstrated or taught to them. And I think that we can talk about servant leadership all day long, but to me, character-based capitalism, shared leadership, like the we leaders at every level from wherever we stand, like you can go into a basketball team and everyone would say, yeah, leadership lives in every player on this team. But you can go into any department in corporate America and you'll still hear hierarchical voice. You'll still hear us and them.
Chart stuff, yeah.
Us and them in the same team.
Yep, it's embarrassing. It makes me want to throw up in my mouth twice. And that doesn't even make any sense, but I'm just trying to keep people's attention. And I don't care, to be honest with you, like full transparency, I don't care if there's 1 or 1,000 people on this call right now. Like, I don't give a rat's tail. And you already know, like, everything matters. If you're in a position of conviction of things that you believe need to be reproduced in the world that have benefit in helping people be more effective and more fulfilled, you don't care how many people show up. You don't care how many people drink your Kool-Aid out of the cement truck. You do it because it needs to be done. It doesn't mean because you're a better person or you're trying to create invisible walls between other people and all that stuff or a hierarchy, just like you said. No way. No way. Right. Could I share a strategy that changed my life inside of corporate and teams that expedites real relationships and connectivity unlike anything I've ever seen in my life?
Yes.
Please. And let me put a disclaimer out there, please, ahead of time. This does not involve props, peanuts. You don't have to, a CEO or a head coach of a team doesn't have to walk in on a pony and set off some fireworks in order for this to happen. You don't need anything magical from an expense standpoint, none of that for this to work. It's called If You Only Knew page. It's an If You Only Knew page. And literally what it is you take 30 minutes as a leader on your team, however you want to put yourself, whatever title, whatever you want, and you write down all the crazy things that happen to you. You get a maximum of 30 minutes. This is the If You Only Knew page. Don't use the word I, talk in past tense on everything. So like, this happened. I almost died on a water slide. I never told people in my life that I love them. Right? You know, so you wouldn't use I, you just say, never told people in my life that I love them. And you exhaust a list of good, bad, or indifferent, weird things that happen to you in your life. And you don't wait for people on your team to feel comfortable enough after 3 months or after 3 years to share with them in a transparent way this If You Only Knew page. You do it day one and you take the lead. And you take the lead. It changes everything.
Yeah.
And people are like, holy crap, like for real? I've been working with you for 100 years and I don't know half of this about you.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing.
But it's an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity.
Yes.
You know, to just really see people in a real way as human beings. And I think the workplace could really use some human care and remembering that we're working with human beings. One of the greatest things about parenting for me has been being blessed with children and to be able to see that they're hardwired and they're just gifts to me and I'm just their guide. And I have nothing really to do with who they are because they come out saying, hi, Mom, it's nice to meet you. And I think that's really brought me to a lens of like, if you can see and honor yourself as a parent, you have that opportunity and see these children and then honor their gifts and see who they are and invest in their gifts. Why do we forget in the workplace when people are adults to look at them and say, what's their gift? What is your gift? And sometimes people, I honestly don't even think I knew my gift until I psychoanalyzed myself to death and got a double major in psych by accident and like, right, lived 35 years and then birthed 2 sons, you know, like I don't even think I knew who or what my strength or gift was, Scott. And so only can other people, if people are nice enough to help see you and say to you what they see, and we are strong enough or vulnerable enough to hear it and believe what they're saying to us, will we actually be able to look in the mirror and see who other people see when they see us?
Is it, Nicole, thank you so much for sharing that. Isn't it unbelievable? Like the research is so clear on this. It's embarrassingly clear, right? If you jump inside one of your employees' bodies or someone on your team, right, and identify what their life goals are, or at least shed some light on, okay, here's some things I'd like to accomplish in life. And then you put their work around that versus take the work and just shove it down their neck. And, oh, if you have anything personally that you want to kind of check the box on, you can forget it at our workplace, right? The research is so clear. If you do the opposite, and like you said, take a few minutes quarterly, throughout the day, whatever it is,
right.
It's unbelievable. And you have so many unfair freaking advantages. It's ridiculous.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of people never did that, built their work around their life and knowing who they were. And a lot of people went into what was expected, especially if you come into a family business or you come into a situation that's just dedicated to your path of what you're supposed to do or what's expected or what other people expect of you. And I think I've witnessed so many people in my field, Scott, I mean, thousands, not even hundreds, thousands, who from like the mid 1990s till now were either forced out of their job and had to go and discover who they were and then built something incredible because they built their work around their life, or they actually were thankful that they were pushed to make that decision. But it's always after the fact. But I think what's really unique is there's so many people now who really are doing that naturally. They're coming out of school at 18 and kind of like, no, I'm going to go learn what I want to do. And this is, and they're derived by that meaning, finding that meaning first. It's really remarkable to witness, to be quite honest. And I think the power of it is tremendous. The shift is happening, but you and I talked too, Scott, like how many people really are ready for the shift that's been happening? What are the undertones of leadership today? What's happening in the marketplace and how quickly our business is able to be agile, as we say. I wrote Generational Agility and a webinar on that like over a year ago. And I would say, yeah, I thought it was the top competency last year. And I'm still running into conversations where like, we're still at base 1 and we don't have time.
Oh my gosh.
We have no time anymore. People need to like really embrace the change.
Nicole, imagine this. Let me throw out a hypothetical, please. Imagine this. You're a college student. you're a high school student and you're kind of exploring what you want to do professionally, right? And you're like, I want to be a dentist, okay? Because I enjoy helping other people and I'm fascinated with teeth, okay? But the sentence isn't done with yet, right? People have forgotten the last part of the sentence. And here's what I believe it should be. Don't believe a word I say. I want to be the best dentist I can be because I enjoy this and I do this, right? Whatever, without compromising my core values and destroying myself and my family.
Yeah.
Or whatever your current situation is. And that's why I believe companies have literally taken a dump and teams on all of the participants involved because they forgot the last part of the sentence. And they become so chemically and emotionally drunk to all the other stuff.
Right. It's crazy. I think that really comes back to just the whole person. People really living holistically, and not compartmentalizing their lives anymore. And I think we were born to be compartmentalized and raised to be compartmentalized a little bit. But I think that because Gen Xers who came up from boomers had to amass so many skills just to like play the game. I mean, like going to school was just the ticket to play the game, not even that you get to play the game yet, right? It's really coming back to the place where a lot of people witnessed suffering close to home within their families, sacrifices people made within their families, and just going right away, that's not what I want. And so their convictions, as you say, their passion is so hardwired in just knowing that's not what I want, that suddenly this holistic value, I mean, it's trending in the data where it's showing not even just in the United States, but globally. Globally.
It's a pandemic.
Like globally. I mean, to think that the youth in the United States has that in common with the youth in India and the youth in Japan and the youth in other places, like, you know, it's pretty dynamic to say that globally there's a shift happening within the perspective of how we define work, how we define happiness, how we define success. And some of it's become very intrinsic in a way, and then some of it's very extrinsic, but for intrinsic reasons, like the global movements and immigration and inclusion and the environment and corporate social responsibility, and you know, so it's layered, right? But it all comes from that intrinsic place of self-experience. That's where any of us are coming from, I would think.
Heck yeah. Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
So what advice would you give someone who's listening right now that's 100% controllable, not even knowing their specific situation? If they're an entrepreneur, if they're an employee, if they're on a team or a company, maybe they're sitting in a dentist chair right now listening, you never know. What advice would you give them to take immediate action on that's controllable, knowing all the amazing things that you've had amazing experiences in the business world, you're a continual learner, you never want to graduate ever. What would you tell them to do right now? And literally don't put it on the shelf for longer than 24 hours.
Yeah. The first thing I would ask myself, and I think a lot of people don't do it, which is, what do I actually lose time doing? You know, the one thing that I go home and I'm like tinkering, or I'm whatever it is that you lose time, but you're joyful. Like if someone interrupted you, you might have not even heard what they said because you were having so much fun in your mind with whatever you were doing. What is that? What is that thing that you love to do where you feel happiness and fulfillment? And it could be a very private activity, to be quite honest. But whatever that is, have you ever thought of how I could do this and make this my work? How could I connect this to how I make money and build livelihood for my family and my own fulfillment? And a lot of people have looked at those things as hobbies. And I want to challenge everyone to take whatever they thought was their hobby, or that they kind of just did on the side because they're passionate about it, and repackage it completely and say, what if I could do that all the time? And not what if, but no, I'm going to do that all the time. And now step 2, how do I do that all the time?
Yep. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Where could I ask
themselves? They don't give themselves permission, Scott. I don't know.
People are afraid. They're scared. What a great feeling, or what a great skill to give to your children or the people you're in the trenches with at work. Yeah. A level of freedom where there's no fear that destroys us all, because we all know our goals are on the other side of fear, right? All that fun stuff.
Well, fear is really dynamic. I think it affects all of us in different ways. I mean, even me, when I started my own consulting, one of the reasons it didn't become a business right away, I mean, I called it a business, Scott, right? And I had
Yep.
clients. And then when my first, success came to me and it was a guy who was pitching me for an investment opportunity, I looked at him like, what? I'm just a little tiny consulting practice. He go, no, you're in business. So if you think about that, just such a whoo.
Yep. Heck yeah.
How many people don't give themselves permission to dream big enough and see it the way that other people see them, like I said?
Well, isn't permission feeling the value of what you just said? Like, why would anyone give a rat's tail about pursuing something, a desired action or behavior ever, unless they were celebrated or rewarded for even 1% of the way going to where you're supposed to go? Like, I think I call this outcome disease. We're starting to pay the price big time in companies and teams, big time. And personally also, we've rewarded outcome and performance so much. Now we're getting to a point where people are so hollowed out, Nicole, they're so hollowed out and so dead from the inside out, because when they don't get the outcome or the performance that they want, regardless of what scenario they're in, they don't know how to act. And
Right.
the peaks between how motivated they are and how demotivated they are so freaking big right now. It's unbelievable. That's $1 billion industry in yourself if you just want to attack that one problem, outcome versus process stuff. And then how can you make process sexy? Like, that's a really big deal.
Well, and I think that it really comes back to men are really about results. They really are. And women primarily are about just effort. And we need both in business. And for a long time, we'd say we needed both, but I think it was always, like you're saying, it was always very results. But there's so many layers of complexities playing out now between human beings and shift and change and rapid change that we've got to put almost 100% into just effort right now and caring in process and the how we treat each other, how we do things before we ever can expect a positive outcome anymore. And that's shown in the trending stuff with like conscious capitalism. We had this keynote that came out for our best and brightest companies to work for summit in Chicago, Dr. Gustavo, and he has a book, Culture Trumps Everything, I believe is the name of the book. And he really does a lot to talk about how capitalism, the shift of capitalism, those businesses that were always just driven, for the almighty dollar. And now what's happening with the businesses that actually are these startups that have cause marketing, maybe as we thought of it, or, doing something that's like the biggest not-for-profit you've ever seen, but what? I just think those kind of dynamic situations really come to drive, the why, drive it to the why, and people will stay for less money, maybe in a position for less money. They'll do something that maybe people wouldn't expect, but why? Because it actually hit that chord for them. It's the how, or that they had their handprint on something bigger than themselves finally.
Imagine that. Yeah, Nicole, let's go.
Well, what do you think? What do you think when you're working in team environments and you're thinking about them coming together as a team, when you're driving that we conversation with like what you're doing? What do you think is the biggest thing that comes out stifling a conversation from fear within the safety of the room and the team? Most of it is you can't even get a safe conversation on the table because people are still biting their damn tongues, being complacent, which is the first problem in relationships.
Yeah, Nicole, let's get that juice going a little bit. Here we
But
go.
it's true. Like,
I feel your energy.
Tell me what you're really thinking, right? And a lot of people do not give themselves permission to speak what they're really thinking at work. And that's how you get to complacency and people just coming to work and collecting a check and, but what do you see with some of the teams when you're facilitating? I'm guessing you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing.
Well, I call it baby duck syndrome. People are like baby ducks following their mother around. They just follow the feelings throughout the day, and they hang out with people at work who make them feel good, not who challenge them, not who hold them accountable to anything and actually celebrate the accountability or anything like that. It's, hey, I'm gonna hang out with you because you're status, because you can level me up, blah, 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 blah. And then you just perpetuate that unless someone is intelligent enough to say, no, thank you. That's extremely unhealthy and will never, ever pass the longevity test ever. ever. I might as well smack your kids in the mouth and get it over with, because we're going to destroy you in the workplace and at home because we're not intelligent and confident enough to say, hey, no, we all have the same exact human value. And don't let the chemical exchange, the emotional addiction of, okay, her economic value might be different than mine, but I'm not going to let that determine how we behave around each other. No, thank you.
Like core values, right? You talked about core values when we were chatting, and we had this whole kind of exchange about core values. And it's crazy how many companies have core values that are still lip service on the wall, like Enron, right? And it's like, yeah, these are our core values, but nobody could tell you what they are. Nobody could tell you how they're lived. They started like in a vacuum in a back room. It's crazy. So a lot of companies have to revamp their core values and put the handprint of the we on it a little bit before people have any drive to emotionalize it within their day.
Love it. Can I ask you a question, please? I'm interested to get your feedback.
Sure.
Can you have core values at work and execute them at a semi-high level and not have them at home? Real talk.
I think that for them to really be meaningful for a human being, the business's values need to align to the personal values. My personal values must align to your organizational values. But if they don't, or if there's an absence of what those organizational values are, that's when people decide for themselves if there's anything there that aligns with them, and that's when people leave.
Nicole, I drink your Kool-Aid out of a cement truck. So guess what though? Let's start counting on our hands right now the number of colleges and universities respectfully who are teaching coursework on creating and thinking through your personal core values, let alone your entrepreneurial core values.
Gosh.
Let me start counting. Start counting on your end, please. Zero. Zero. It's embarrassing.
I think only one. I'm going to name one. Benedictine University's got a lot going on values-based leadership, but that's the only one in
Awesome.
Chicago. I don't know. Yeah, but it is a necessary component.
Go take a class there.
It's a necessary component of curriculum going forward, I think, so that people really can identify their value framework. What's interesting is that if you ask an IO psychologist, and I've done this, can you tease apart statistically somebody's values from their cognitive abilities or their strengths? And an IO psychologist who does stats all day long will tell you they cannot statistically tease the three apart, which means that people actually have their values hardwired in them, and it comes in terms of our bias. But a lot of us don't know maybe what they are or how convicted we are about them, or how that comes into the we framework of other human beings. And so that's the challenge, is making sure that businesses are meeting people halfway to say, yeah, you know, for example, there's a company who has, let's say, no training, right? And they're high growth. I run into these companies all the time. And they'll say, we don't have a training program. We're high growth. We need people who can hit the ground running, which means we need experienced people. And I would say, no, maybe you don't need experienced people. You just need people who actually thrive on challenge, who love to swim. They're going to swim. You could throw them in a tank of sharks and they're still going to swim. That's a cognitive ability. And that's something that you can actually profile somebody with no work experience for. And that's the difference, is companies don't realize that you can actually find those human beings, and the person with no experience might be exactly who you want versus the person with 20 years of experience. And I think we have to reskill not just our young people and teaching them skills, but we have to reskill the people who've been working for 20 years in emotional intelligence, because we never talked about it in the workplace before. Kind of new still, to be quite honest.
Heck yeah. Nicole, one thing that changed my life, I got to work with Pat Summit, the head women's basketball coach at University of Tennessee, for 2 years. And I'll never forget this. Thanks for listening. I'm in her house and she's interviewing me. And I said, hey, if this doesn't work out for whatever reason, what are 2 truths that you would share with me that I should know? And she said, number 1, never, ever graduate, ever. You shed light on the emotional intelligence piece. No disrespect against formal education. Right now, people get done with their high school, their college degrees, whatever, and they detest learning. And I don't care what space you're in, if you're a husband, mother, father, it doesn't matter what your situation is personally either. Like, you have to be the most passionate learner in the room. And if you're not, your kids are going to pay the price. Yeah. Your spouse is going to pay the price. Your family members are going to pay the price. So I think we need to hold each other to another level of joyful accountability on how fun that can really be. First and foremost, thanks for listening. The second thing Pat Summit told me that changed my life, and she demonstrated this. She goes, never ever, Scott, never hire another person on your team or company ever that you don't entrust their skills enough to change your mind.
Oh.
Like, what are we doing, Nicole, when you hire? How shame on you. If you're an HR person and you let someone in your space at work and you don't trust their skills enough to change your mind, there's no way in heck that works out.
I believe everybody deserves a chief challenger, as I call them. Everybody deserves somebody who does not filter the truth for you. They better be right in your business, right in front of you, so that you're always hearing the truth, not a filtered truth. Everybody deserves a chief challenger, as I say. And you should have a chief challenger on your team. And if you don't, then that's the first indicator there's something off. If everything's sunshine and roses, well, then you didn't go to the other end of the spectrum of the rainbow on thought of how things are viewed, right? You know, I love that you brought that up, that ability to be a lifelong learner. I just bought a car over the weekend, and my young son was in the room with me, and the guy who was financing it and everything, he's like making mistakes, you know, and he's ripping up papers and he's putting it down. And I'm using that opportunity for my son, who is very hardwired, right? I'm looking at him and I'm like, see, it's okay to make a mistake, honey. Watch, he's going to make another one. We're going to giggle about it. We're going to move forward, right? Because that's so important. I saw there's a guy out there. He founded the Institute of Health and Human Potential out of Canada. His name's Dr. Polly Fry. Changed my life when I saw him speak many years ago, I think 2008. He has amazing work. And his thing was, quit telling your children to be smart. It's not important to be smart. What's important is to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Yeah, let's go.
Right? Learn,
Dr. Fry, let's go.
So not just learn, but learn and unlearn and relearn, right? So that you can actually, and that's what we're all doing it right now. We're all having to unlearn things, learn new things. And I get 10 years from now, and we're still probably, hopefully, vibrant and healthy and giving of our skills and our resources. Hopefully we're still open enough to unlearn what we've learned these 10 years and relearn whatever comes down the pike next, because it's just going to keep coming.
Love it. Nicole, have you heard of the documentary In Search of Greatness before?
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, so for anyone who's listening or watching right now, shame on you. I'm saying as a friend.
Shame on me.
If you haven't watched this movie. Again, it's fun to say that, right? Challenge someone, whatever. In Search of Greatness. There's two major takeaways from this film. And it comes down to exactly what you said, Nicole.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any exception to any human being in the history of the world. There's two things you have to prioritize. Number one is you have to have a rage to master. A rage to master. That's what high performers do. This is not up for negotiation. This is not negotiable, right? The second thing, they have to be a fast learner. Yeah. That of which is in your DNA, right? In your genetics, the best you can. Max out your ability, right? To process information in the fastest way, retain and act on it, right? It makes all sense in the world to me. There's nothing you can say, my wife, anyone else, that's going to convince me anything else that's different, that's better than those two things, in my opinion. Changed my life.
Interesting. But so you say so there's those two components for the search for greatness. Inside
of that film and that documentary.
That film, that's what it's saying, is that you have to have this rage to master and be a fast learner. What's interesting though is, like, when I work with teams, some people would say you don't want slow learners on your team. And I would argue that every good team has a slow learner on the team, because guess who they are? Guess who they are?
Yeah.
Why would you want one, Scott?
Well, processing power.
Yeah.
Fast and slow is a really, really big deal. You have to be able to think things through. It's the rule of 10. The rule of 10, right? You got to have, if you're 10 employees deep, 10 members deep on your team, you got to have someone who literally operates, behaves the exact opposite of everyone else. And you have to encourage that.
Yeah. And I think that those are the people who save our lives. You know, some people might think of them as skeptics or people who are like just curmudgeon and bah humbug, but you know what? They're going to save your life. They're going to see the error in the big spreadsheet that you move fast through. They're going to be the people who cross the T and dot the I.
Yes.
And so that's the difference of cognitive emotional intelligence, is not judging the person on the other end of the spectrum, but appreciating that, hey, they got something you don't, and you need each other.
Get some. Let's go.
That's the baseline. And so I think real team diversity, the definition of diversity to me is how we process information and making sure that your team has somebody at the table that processes information on all spectrums, a voice from all of the spectrums on that cognitive ability framework. You can actually team engineer then a team where if you put down a problem, someone on that team could solve that problem. And we're going to need that when we're working in a global world. Because if we're constantly hiring people that are just like us, which I have actually seen, it's crazy. You can have a team then where everybody, like let's say I hired 10 people just like me, just because it was comfortable and we could talk all day and it was great and we could keep each other up and we could move fast. If I did that and I didn't create natural constructive conflict in my business, then we wouldn't be able to solve problems because we'd just be continually moving forward. And at some point in time, guess what? Our boat would sink.
Yes.
Because I certainly wasn't thinking about maybe something that the slow person who was thinking and processing information would have caught for me.
Love it. Love it.
But they got to feel safe enough to tell me.
Oh, 100%.
And that comes back to environment.
Makes sense to me. Nicole, you've had some amazing experience. What lessons taking you the longest to learn?
I think to slow down, because I am so fast. So my biggest emotional intelligence driver, if I'm in the top 10% of speed talkers and speed movers and speed thinkers, right? It is diligence, Scott, for me to slow down and listen and observe and get away and think. And most people would think that maybe I'm always like this, but when I get home, you ask my husband. He'll tell you she sat down and she needed 10 minutes to just talk before she talked to the kids because she gave all her energy out there, right? So it's really forcing yourself to go to the opposite end. And so I can say it's probably taken me a good 20 years to get intentional about it daily.
Love it.
You know, you got to think about it. You got to really love it enough to try. And it doesn't just become auto. I think if you're really somebody, the more extreme and gifted you are in whatever it is you do, if you're really good at something, I guarantee you're going to have to intentionalize whatever it is that you need to go to the other side. And it has to become diligence, and it's got to be done from love.
You got to be a bulldog. Yep. You got to be obsessed with it, almost to an unhealthy point, in my opinion. Yep.
To be balanced anyway, or to be agile with your ability to build relationships and talk with people. But if I'm talking with somebody who's the opposite of me, oh boy, did I have to really just intentionally just shut up. Right? Like intentionally.
Yep. Awesome. Can I ask another question, please?
Sure.
So I got my notes here. Can you tell me more about appreciation at work and why that is such a big deal? I know you have an article on your website about it on an HRBOOST.
Yeah.
Is it HRBOOST?
It's just HRBOOST.com. Yeah.
.com. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think appreciation is huge. A lot of people are all about, we got to do our recognition programs and our rewards programs and blah, blah, blah. And then in HR, they're all about, well, we have to recognize people, but then they'll put a recognition program. It's not even tied to the competency that drives revenue here.
Yes, yes, yes.
To something meaningful for the business. You might as well just flush the money down the toilet. I have issues with that. And so if people can't answer tough questions for me, then we're not going to have recognition because I don't know what we're recognizing it for. So we'll start there. But appreciation comes back to really appreciating somebody. You're like cracking up at me.
This is the truth. I don't care what anyone thinks. This is the truth.
The appreciation comes back to really recognizing somebody in their language. There's this thing we tell our kids, oh my gosh, right, Scott? Which is treat other people like you want to be treated. Isn't that the golden rule? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I never will tell my children to treat other people how you want to be treated. No, it's treat other people how they want to be treated. And other people, you have a responsibility to treat other people how to treat you. You have to teach people how you want to be treated. It is craziness. So that's appreciation, which is taking the time for me to know, Scott, how do you like to be appreciated? And it's okay to ask a person how they like to be appreciated. And they'll tell you, and then you need to remember that. And then try to appreciate them in the way they would like to be appreciated. And if we could do that, we do it at home and in our relationships, in our loving relationships, we do that naturally. We go out of our way even to do it, I think, for people we love. But I think at business, people will be like, oh no, we're going to stand everybody up in front of the room. We're going to give them a prize. And 10% of the room is like, oh my God. Because you forgot to appreciate that person how they would like to be appreciated, which is maybe just a soft note that you wrote down and put on their desk so that you know, I see you and thank you.
Got you.
Out of their comfort zones. You got to appreciate people. Gary Chapman wrote a great book called The 5 Love Languages, and then he has a new great thing about appreciation in the workplace. I called this whole world Gary Chapman's world. For $200, anybody can go and get certified for appreciation in the workplace. And when I talked to the guy who was head of business development there, I said, oh my God, this is so great. You must have tons of facilitators around the country who are signing up to do this, right? He said, you'd think so, Nicole, but no. So anybody who's looking to do that, they're looking for people.
Nicole, quick question, please. Sorry to interrupt. What percentage of companies are you around that demonstrate gratitude or appreciation in a way that anyone would even notice it if they hung out with them for 5 minutes? What percent out of 100?
Oh, 10%.
Isn't that embarrassing?
10%. It's sad to me. It's disheartening, in fact, because only 10% of leaders really are outward or intentional with what they're trying to do with appreciation, and with the word go of just saying, I appreciate the people who helped me make this vision happen. But then there's people who say it, Scott, too. And then they don't do it, which becomes service. And that's not going to be tolerated anymore in business.
No way. People are exiting stage left faster than ever.
Yeah. And what's even scarier is that even within some of the best companies that have been recognized to do it, especially if they're larger, it's a big intentional commitment to make it believed at all levels for an organization. And it takes all people, leadership at all levels in order to do that. Not just a good marketing campaign.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
One thing that
oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. One thing that changed my life is that there's such an opportunity to increase gratitude right now on teams and companies. Like, it's unbelievable that I'm actually going to sporting practices at all levels, high school, collegiate, and professional, and I'm quoting the number of times. If you're getting sick in your mouth right now, like, I can understand why. Like, I'm getting sick too.
I'm not.
Like, I have to write down and tick off the number of times, Nicole, the number of times a coach or a CEO actually says please or thank you in a meeting or any type of operational situation at work. It's unbelievable. But here's my opinion. Thanks for listening.
Wow.
Knowing that that's the way it is, you have so much opportunity out there. If you're a startup, if you're doing this, if you're on a team or whatever it is, if you leverage that, you have so many competitive advantages, because the best thing about gratitude, it increases your awareness, and the greater your awareness, the greater your power. So let's do this. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and it's not even just please and thank you. I find it fascinating they're doing it based on good manners, like mannerisms. But I really believe one of these things that's really devastating is 68%, this was on some global trends, 68% of the talent pool right now basically stated that they feel isolated despite being surrounded by people or being connected to people or having a network. 68%. And so there's this new form of depression even for high achievers out there. There's so much going on in the mental health arenas. And what's really sad is it really comes down to stopping and just saying, I see you. We are not pausing enough to say, I see you, and making that person feel seen. So it's not just please and thank you. It's no, I see you. Not, did I spend a second actually eye to eye with you, letting you feel how I can make you feel? Because it's going to be how I make you feel, not something I said. It's going to be, you won't remember what I said. It's going to be how I made you feel. Did I make you feel something? And if I did that, that's good. And hopefully it wasn't rage. And hopefully it wasn't yelling. And hopefully it wasn't embarrassment. And hopefully it wasn't failure.
Nicole, thank you for sharing that. Please tell me you've seen the music video Beautiful People by Ed Sheeran.
I haven't seen the music video. I live under a rock, I think. I'm like, I don't know, I'm a mom of a 3-year-old. I'm just happy to survive potty training. I haven't seen the video. Tell me about the video I'm missing. I think Ed Sheeran's an amazing singer. I've heard his music, but I haven't seen his video.
He's a different animal. I think he's got a really unique high level of awareness. There's a line in his song. There's part of the track in his song that says, "We're surrounded, but still alone."
Yes.
Exactly to your point. And I believe that video highlights a lot of things that we are not being aware and awake to, that is destroying teams and companies. And there's some other really unique things about that video too, but I think it highlights everything that you just said too.
I love that. Yeah, and I align to it just from my own personal grounding principle. I don't know, Scott, do you have grounding principles for yourself, just to like?
Heck yes, love it.
Yeah.
Go please, go please.
Yeah, so for me personally, people would say, Nicole, what do you do every day to just bring yourself back to base and home? And for me, I say a quote that I read to myself literally when I was 10 years old at a Reader's Digest, if you can imagine it, a million years ago.
Yes.
And it was an anonymous quote. But through my life now, I've come to a place where I just have to say this quote to myself wherever I am, and it will bring me peace, and it will bring me back to the present moment with whoever I'm with. And it's just, presence is more important than being present. And to me, presence, how you define presence, is something unique to every person. But to me, it's my heart, my mind, my body, my soul, my breath, my heartbeat. Just, am I present? Yeah, I'm physically present with you, Scott, but did I bring my presence of my heart and my mind to our conversation, to you? Presence. And how do we bring presence to people in a meaningful way?
Yeah, let's go.
But I think that's what, if every single person had a grounding way to bring themselves back to their own, right? And then to show up, not physically, but like with presence, and then authentically trust themselves to give and authentically trust the people that are there to see them and receive them, it will change the world.
It's a game changer, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Nicole, really, really appreciate the opportunity. And again, I don't care if 100 or 300 people listen. Is there anything that we want to really drive home here at the end, or before we put our board in, because I'll be mindful of our Zoom time call and all that stuff too. So
I think that any business that really wants to capitalize on the human spirit and really get high performance out of their teams for 2020 needs to get real, and needs to actually maybe even come back from the brink and be vulnerable, and maybe own some mistakes and say, I'm sorry that, maybe I took a survey in the past and I didn't tell you what I heard or what we're going to do about it, and kind of start credibility fresh, or ask for the opportunity to start with credibility fresh, and then start building a new bank account of cash with credibility and walk the talk. But in order to do that, they're going to have to get really authentically unrobed to their workforces and be authentically real, and then invite the team to come together and start fresh from a place of I see you, and maybe even taking your suggestion, right, Scott, with like, if you only knew. That's an awesome opportunity to even just say, if you only knew. Like, I did a letter of gratitude. I wish I would have done if you only knew letter. That would have been even deeper than a gratitude letter, to be honest. And if I took that letter and then did it first, led by example, right, and then invited others to do it, that right there, best probably hour-long facilitated discussion of a team that could really change the temperature and the mood and the foundation. Best opportunity, best time spent, money, ROI return. I think good takeaways, even for myself, I think that's why I like talking with you, Scott. I think people who can have leadership together and just talk and share, we can spark our own innovation of bringing each other's tools and ideas together. And I think by us doing this openly, hopefully we can inspire other leaders to feel more comfortable doing it too. But I want to thank you so much for everything you did just to spark my mind when we were on the phone while I was in traffic. Very cool. And then showing up again, we'll have to do it again and again sometime, right, Scott? All good. Love it. Yep. Appreciate the opportunity. Yeah. So basically, anybody who wants to reach out to Scott, tell them how. ScottSavor.com. My cell phone number is 248-217-9725. I want real relationships only. I give everyone my cell phone number. Very nice. Very nice. Well, and I feel privileged to have his cell phone number then. And so I definitely want to thank him for being real with me, not once, but twice now. And I want to thank him for the good questions that he has and the good gives, right? Lots of share and good quality. Hopefully everybody got a golden nugget today, something that will take you forth, fuel you. I think you have to be good about self-care and refueling yourself first before you give oxygen to others. And so sometimes if you need time away before you break on this, it's not for the light of heart or faint of heart, but know that Scott and I are here for you, and we're definitely fans of you if you're doing it and keeping it real yourselves. Right, Scott? Awesome. And then shout out to Ryan too for our tech master. Yes. Thanks for the assistance today, Ryan. Let's go. I love my guys behind the scenes. I'm telling you, magic. It takes a team. So have a blessed holiday and take it just into the rest of the week, you guys. Have a great rest of 2019. Thanks, awesome. Guys. Appreciate you. Likewise. Mwah.